Good day, everyone. Today, we are going to learn about the coming of life part 2. One day, a tiny drop of jelly appeared. And in this tiny little drop of jelly, God said, I give you something that no one else has. I give you sensitivity. In order to exist, you must eat and grow. But all of you will not eat the same thing. You will also have the power to create others like yourselves, and that's your specialty. So, life came in the form of tiny blobs of jelly. Each of these had laws to follow: eat, grow, and create others like themselves. They were like tiny little machines, just like a tiny little car that grew and then split up. These little tiny drops of jelly began the work of cleaning up the sea as they fed up with the salt of the water. They built up their own bodies. Some of them found the water itchy, and so they built shells to protect themselves. When they did, these tiny shells dropped to the bottom of the sea, and the salt remained trapped in the shells. As time passed, these creatures died layer upon layer. These new kinds of mud piled up at the bottom of the sea, like pages of the book of the earth. Some of these pages have remained for us to read later on, so we can tell what happened a very long time ago before anyone else was born. These tiny little creatures were made up of just one cell, which did all this work: breathing, eating, and moving. The creatures move about from one place to another, drifting about and cleaning the water. But then, as time went on, some of them said, "Why not join together? Because then we can be more efficient. We can do things better." Along came creatures slightly bigger, made out of several cells. They too went on feeding on the waters of the sea, growing and creating others like themselves. This went on for a long time, until some of them thought that instead of one cell doing all the jobs, why not give the other cells the other jobs? So, some cells lined up and were told, "You do the breathing for us." Other cells lined up and were told, "You do the moving along for us." Some cells lined up and were told, "You do the eating for us." When the book of Earth opened its first page, all these tiny creatures were already there, living in the water. Some of them are all gone, but some of them are still alive until today. Here we have the blob of jelly, a one-celled creature which did all of its work. It had no shell. Here's another called flagellate, with two little webs to help it move about. There were sponges which were made up of many cells, all doing the same job. Here's another one that stayed in the same place, with arms or like feathers catching little animals and putting them into their mouths. Those were the echinoderms. Sea anemones like this stayed in one place. This creature is made up of a group of cells. In order to get food, they moved the water with these long, thin body parts, so tiny creatures in the water would come into their mouths. There was one kind of creature that could be found in ancient seas in great numbers. They are known as trilobites. They were sort of like lobsters of our present day. Trilobites were the most advanced creatures of their time. They grew in many shapes and sizes. Today, we no longer have these creatures, but they were around for a long time at the beginning of life on Earth. Time went on, and all kinds of creatures appeared. All sorts of experiments went on. Look here. This creature is called cephalopod. It has its legs attached to its head. Cephalo means head and pod means foot. So they were the head-footed animals. As time went on, all kinds of animals appeared. Here we have creatures that look like flowers, but they were not flowers at all. They stayed in one place like the sea anemones. They built stone houses for their jelly-like creatures. Some of them were made out of one cell. They took the salt out of the sea and built stone rings, one on top of each other, to look like flowers on a stalk. The feathery parts were what they waved about in water, so that any little creature passing by could be grabbed and eaten by them. Because of their looks and colors, they were called sea lilies, but they were animals, not plants. When they died, the stone rings collapsed and fell to the bottom of the sea. The waters were full of life this time. As time went on, all kinds of animals appeared. There were creatures of long ago who, instead of eating other creatures, they made their own food out of sunlight and salts in the water. These were the first seaweeds. They too drifted along the sea, and at some point later, some of them decided to see what was like at the edge of the land. They floated on the tides and remained on the rocks until the tides remained. As they remained out of the water, they found that they liked it there, for there was plenty of sunlight, and the air was full of a gas that they needed to make food. So they remained at the edge of the sea, making their own food and feeding themselves. When they died, their bodies prepared the ground for other life forms to come. Gradually, others joined them. This was the first time that life tried out the land. These were the ones that developed into the first plants. For the first time, plants appeared on the land. Life was now moving on the land. While plants were trying out the land, two new kinds of animals appeared in the sea. One of these was the coral polyp, which helped to build up the land by eating salts in the sea. And the other one was a strange little animal with a rod inside. It was the beginning of animals with backbones. And at this time, animals developed into the first fish. There was a great variety of fish that grew in the ocean. These fish were different from those we have today. They were enormous with hard shells on the outside to protect themselves. They had heavy armor in their bodies and were not able to move around very fast. So they remained buried in the mud, hiding so they could catch animals as they passed by. Some could swim very swiftly, and they developed movable fins which helped them to swim better. And then, slowly over a period of time, the land in some places started to rise up.